welcome to another Hot Button Issue broadcast right here on Choice Television. With me, Timothy Polian. We conclude at about 15 minutes after 10 o'clock with the clip that peaked, and of course, you do not want to miss that. Over in the United States, as of last Friday, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 5 in favor and 4 against to legalize same-sex marriage across all 50 states of the U.S. This has sent ripples throughout the world, including St. Lucia and other parts of the Caribbean. People are asking whether it will be landing on our shores anytime soon. And since then, there's been a debate involving those who are pro as well as those who are against. Also, leaders of a regional coalition of LGBT organizations sent a letter recently, as today, to the leaders of CARICOM countries, urging them not to fall prey to, quote, regional panic in response to equal marriage. And in response, we have had a letter from Carry Flags to an online petition by the Jamaica Coalition for Healthy Society, which called on regional leaders to, quote, stand firm against international pressures to abolish what is being described as logical common sense principles necessary for human flourishing. We're discussing this issue as well as other related areas. My guest this evening is Kenita Placide, who is the coordinator for the Eastern Caribbean, and that is for the organization called Carry Flags, the Caribbean Forum for Liberation and Acceptance of Genders and Sexualities. Welcome to the broadcast, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
What do you make of the ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court as of Friday?
I think there's a situation where you look at the position of Carry Flags and the panic that is causing in the Caribbean. As we understand it, not everything that happened in the West or in the North, as we call it, is necessarily what's going to happen in the Caribbean. And I think religious leaders calling out to political leaders to step out on a platform of responding to what really does not affect us. I mean, the organizations that I work with and for are looking for the equality and justice of and for LGBT persons, ensuring that the life to be able to contribute as citizens is what we look at, not being able to, whereas we understand where our neighboring countries have been able to advance to that stage. We are certainly not there. We are nowhere close, and people need to recognize that.
But certainly you must have really accepted what transpired in the United States on Friday.
There's not a level of acceptance. There's not a level, I mean...
No, but what was your reaction? What was your response? Your reaction?
Are you asking for personal response, yes, or are you asking for an organizational
your personal response? Your personal response. How you felt
personal response, Friday? I identify with the human rights defenders that have stood and have fought for what they believe in. That is where they at. This is not where we at. And so therefore, recognizing that, Timothy, that whatever opinion that I may give for or against, no one is going to remember Kenita said it as a personal opinion, but that of an organization. And that is what we have resisted to temptation with all media houses in responding.
So all your response would be in sync with the position taken by Carry Flags. You'll not be giving your own personal response to any of my questions.
Well, at the point that I'm speaking on behalf of Carry Flags, it is one that we actually had a meeting to decide on our response, and I think this is where it's at. As an organization, in terms of United and Strong, we have stayed out of this because we recognize that, unfortunately, every time we do a press release, the harm may not necessarily come to me, although they have been threats. The harm goes to the other ordinary citizens who are known to be gay, who are known to be open, and they're the ones who get majority of the backlash of society.
So you're saying that in St. Lucia we are so homophobic to the point where we will unleash violence on people that we deem to be different?
We do, and unfortunately we may not have 150 cases as we recognize what the population is, but the fact that we can count 2 or 3 or 5, it says that it is something that we need to nip in the bud before it becomes more problematic.
How do we do that as a society? How do we end the hatred for members of the LGBT community?
I think, how do we end the hatred, or how do we end violence generally? And I think this is where the call is. We need to work together to eliminate, reduce stigma and discrimination. We need to be able to call out and stand up against all forms of violence. And I think, it is something that we have been calling on different organizations to partner with United and Strong to do, including the faith-based organizations. And if you remember 2012, when we held this session around spirituality and sexuality, people thought we were trying to change theology, which was not the case, but we were trying to get a deeper understanding of why there is so much hatred. But, and then again, we look at the fact that religion was something that was brought during colonial times, as well as the laws that they hold so firmly to. One is held higher than the other. And although we try as much as possible not to debate the issue of religion and a matter of asking persons to respect it, and I think we look at it in St. Lucia as every child, before now, where there are even more religions, but it was a rite of passage. Every child belonged to a religion because that's where their parents were. Now it is changing a bit, where some people don't necessarily believe in church, and some people, it's not just Christianity that exists in St. Lucia. But it is a case that we need to look at. How do we, as a whole, not just LGBT, not just women, not just children, how do we as a society reduce stigma, discrimination, and the end result being reducing violence altogether? But
you would understand from the perspective of the Christian community that there will not be any kind of acceptance for that kind of lifestyle. Do you understand that? Do you accept it?
From the standpoint of a Christian society, we ask persons to treat people humane. Treat them as human beings.
But acceptance?
Listen, would you want to be tolerated as an individual? And if you look at your life generally as a child growing up and all the bullying that was done, I remember growing up Hospital Road, where people were stoning people's house because they felt they were different. That is not right. And that is the point. If we do not stop one level, it evolves. We used to just throw little stones at people we thought that was different. Now we throw knives and guns. We feel that we can take a life. How do we account to those parents? How do we account to those friends for taking a life simply for an individual being themselves and not infringing on other people?
Remove the physical attacks, because clearly it is unacceptable. The physical attacks on members of the LGBT community, that is totally unacceptable and illegal, and certainly we should frown upon it. But what about people who have their own beliefs because of their own religious background, and they say that they really are not accepting this because this is not seen as a way of Christ in a so-called Christian society?
People have to be able to understand. You have to agree to disagree. I can agree that you have the right to your religion, regardless of what it is. And even if I may not be of that religion, you would have to agree to disagree that I have my life, or anybody else does. And I think what we call upon is not necessarily churches, but we call on governments to ensure protection, equality, and justice is afforded for all. So anything that is basically within the law that allows you to be an individual, you look at quality of citizenship, it's afforded to everybody at the same level. And that's what it is. However, if we want to bring religion into constitution, that's where it becomes problematic. Because how about everybody not believing in the same thing? Do Rastafarians believe in the Babylon system? We now have Muslims. Do we have Jews and others that may decide that Christianity is not the way? Are we going to tell those persons that they cannot practice or they cannot exist? But I think we need to be reasonable, and we need to be open-minded about the reality of what's there. We're not saying that you need to infringe on someone's religious beliefs, the same way one religious person do not need to infringe on anybody else's beliefs.
So Carry Flags, therefore, does not look at this from a religious standpoint at all, and do not look at what is in the Bible with regard to homosexuality and so on.
I don't know if you have to say that we do not look at what's within the Bible. I mean, we have a high percentage of persons who are LGBT that are Christian, that, you know, believe in a higher being. And that's something that cannot be taken away. I mean, even most recently we had a pastor. He's currently a pastor at the Anglican Church in Toronto. He was an ex-police officer and therefore came with the expertise and experience to be able to train officers. We have carried out this training and when people thought, oh, it's going to be an LGBT training, no, what the training really entailed was how to create or how to enforce, how to better skills at community policing and what that entails, which is the treatment of all people within your community at the same level, which makes it less of a force, but more of community policing. You know, so I think people need to take a look at what we actually do, how we try to do it before they just figure out that this is where we're going. The Caribbean has a lot of work ahead of it. And I mean, we have seen the influence of religious organizations, not just on LGBT issues, but also on HIV. Most recently, we had Sarah Flood Bobra speaking about, you know, UNAIDS and the LGBT community getting her fired by the UN. This has been a continuous talk, and I think they need to have the reality of what's happening. And if governments have come together, they have spoken, and there is an agreed language, an agreed conversation. If you are going to represent government, you can't go outside that. You have to stay within the scope, regardless of what you believe, not if you represent it. And it's the same thing that's going to happen here tonight. The fact that we as Carry Flags have sat down and looked at this, it's not really, this petition was out before the judgment came. So it's not about the US law. It's not about Europe law. I mean, if we look at gay marriage have been in the Caribbean for a bit. It has been in the Caribbean. All the French territories, the Dutch territories, the British territories has it. So why does it matter now that the US have done it? We have had it in the Caribbean and it has not come to St. Lucia. So why would it now reach because the US has it? And that's what I would like to understand.
And that's primarily because people are suggesting that the U.S. has so much sway, so much influence over us in the Caribbean. Everything we see the U.S. would undertake, that we would want to implement it in our own backyard as well.
We're 7 times British, 7 times French. We're not U.S.
Yeah, but
however, we allow the influences. And I think most persons would want to look at what's in the backyard that actually sway us. They would have to look at all the technology that they're getting from the U.S.
Would you want to see the day in St. Lucia when gay marriage is permissible, is allowed?
Timothy, would you like to see the day when St. Lucia no longer have any violence, no crime rates, no stigma and discrimination, no violence against anybody, and everybody can just live in a society where they all agree? In a society where we're looking at the Caribbean 2030. What does that look like?
I'd want to see that day, but again, I'm asking.
But again, if that day arrived, then we would not be having this conversation.
Yes, the conversation may be even more intense. But
intense?
Yeah. Does Carry Flag want to be in a position where, for example, you could have members of the LGBT community marrying, where you have homosexuals marrying, lesbians, etc.?
Timothy, I remember agreeing to come on the show not to have a conversation about marriage. Mm-hmm. So if I decide to decline to answer that, forgive me, but I think it is really pushing off on trying to get an answer behind what we're not prepared for.
Okay. Let's move on to another issue, and that is the seeming disagreement that's taking place between Carry Flags and the Jamaica Coalition for a Healthy Society. You seem to be fighting for the attention of CARICOM leaders who are scheduled to meet in Jamaica sometime tomorrow. That's in Barbados. Tomorrow.
Barbados.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the fight over between those two organizations, Carry Flags and the JCHS?
I think what has happened is JCHS, that's the Jamaica Coalition for Healthy Societies. They have been able to pull through a number of organizations more or less evangelical organization, faith-based organizations, as well as we saw this build up really coming out of the case in Belize, where religious organizations started rallying and having matches. There was a match in Belize, Trinidad, Jamaica. There was a small one in Soufrière, right here in St. Lucia. And we recognize that it's all against gay, people being gay, gay marriage. They have pulled in this issue long before it became so, I would say, a priority. For the Caribbean, gay marriage is not a priority. And again, I will say that gay marriage is not a priority. For us in the Caribbean, quality of citizenship is. However, they have decided that the CARICOM heads of government is meeting in Barbados, and they have put through this petition online that has pulled through 12,000 English speakers signing on. And again, between French and Spanish, another 21,000 or thereabout. And we monitored this because we saw this was something that was in the building. It was the same group that was supporting Brian Bain at the time when they filed the case against in UWI.
As a professor from UWI, yeah?
Yeah. And again, when we look at the impact of this, I'm sorry to say we can relate it, we cannot relate it. It's the same time that we lost 2 major programs. All the Caribbean HIV/AIDS Alliance programs around the OECS closed down. This is one gap in HIV. Again, the other facility in Jamaica that was actually training the chat, the training facility that was helping, that Bain was actually head of. When we look at the impact of what has happened since that case, it has further divided a lot of the countries who do not currently have the economical or the financial support to push programs that was being funded since we lost them. However, they feel that they are creating a healthier society, and the main purpose or the purpose that they're pushing is simply an LGBT focus to stop the gays, don't allow them rights in country, don't acknowledge them, things around the immigration laws for Belize and Trinidad, which actually say gays are not allowed in. They also want to put their voice in that. So these are the kind of things that they have been coming into.
Hold that point. The discussion will continue in just a moment. You're watching Hot Button Issue on Choice Television. We'll be back. Welcome back. You're watching Hot Button Issue right here on Choice Television with me, Timothy Pauly. In just a moment, we'll be taking your calls. Once again, my guest this evening is Kenita Placide, and she's representing CARIFLAGS, which is the Caribbean Forum for Liberation and Acceptance of Genders and Sexualities. With regard to the CARICOM meeting, where CARIFLAGS is taking its case to the regional leaders and also the JCHS, do you think that the CARICOM leaders will have a difficult time in weighing this issue from the perspective of your organization and the perspective of the JCHS, considering that most regional states basically are against issues relating to same-sex marriage and homosexuality and things of that nature?
I think there have been a very difficult case. As we see, CARICOM on a whole has been like a white elephant, a giant that's not moving here or there. They really have not done much for the region for us to talk about, to say in the first place. But we recognize that as a regional body, it's still important to engage them. And one of the things that we as United and Strong, as well as Carry Flags, continuously do is to engage private, public sector, government, and any other person or any other entities that want to be educated or sensitized as to what we do, what are the real issues, and how are we going about it. So this is one other space that gives us this opportunity. Noting that at this point, Carry Flags have organizations in almost every country around the Caribbean, and that's in all 4 languages. Currently, we also have a hub in the Dominican Republic, and you'd understand the issue that's happening there. And as far as I understand it, that is the priority of this CARICOM meeting, not the LGBT issue and the fact that the US have voted this way. For us, it's a very ticklish one because we are working both in Haiti and in DR. And the hub in DR is the one who has the most of the pressure right now. Our secretariat is in Trinidad, and we have been working continuously. We just had a threat of a young lady in Barbados who is frontline. And, you know, even in the media, she came under a lot of pressure and, you know, needed a time out from there. So this is something that, as to whether CARICOM see it as important, I don't know. Do they see lives matter? I mean, even most recent, I listened to Pastor Aristide consider that the 9/11, this ruling by the US is like a 9/11. I do not know in what comparison, because if I have to look at the loss of lives in 9/11, this is exactly what's happening to the LGBT community. So I do not know in what respect that he related it, but I can take it as a relation when we look at the number of persons who have been killed in whatever time frame because of their sexual orientation. We have persons who are alive who are crippled and blind because of their sexual orientation. And when I speak, I don't just speak for St. Lucia because I'm responsible for the Eastern Caribbean. And when we had the different cases, persons' houses stoned, persons could not get out of their houses for how many days because, you know, a mob decided to set out. And most persons, when they are committing a crime, use 2 things, the Constitution and religion, as the reason for them committing it, because it's against God, according to them, and also because the Constitution has it as a crime. They feel that if they stop you from committing a crime, they are within the law. They don't see themselves as committing a crime, what they are doing. So it's a little problematic if states are not stepping in to ensure protections for everybody is aligned in the Constitution, and they do not see where those laws are discriminatory against them.
Do you think that police are turning a blind eye to such attacks in the Eastern Caribbean?
I think police have really come a long way. And whereas there were a number of attacks that was not taken on, I think most recently they have really stepped up. We have seen some police officers who really do due diligence on the cases, although again you'd still have some who are, you know, biased because of religious stance. But I think more and more, we had a very successful training in St. Kitts just a couple weeks ago, where we had over 60 officers sensitized. And I think when you have commissioners and high-ranking officers who take an interest in those things, you also get the junior officers also involved. There is a difference in the interaction that you see at the different trainings.
So generally speaking, you think there's a glimmer of hope?
There's always a glimmer of hope. It's just a matter of how small or how big.
But you think that there's room, sufficient room for there to be tolerance by people who do not in the first place support such acts that are committed by members of the LGBT community?
I think one of the things that people need to realize is that sexuality is not all that makes an individual. And if that's all you're going to judge them on, there is a problem. What happened to the personality, experience, skill sets? Why judge them on who they sleep with or what they do in a bedroom? And how many other people get judged for it? And that's the problem. How many people would actually walk down the road and ask you, are you straight? Are you married? Who are you sleeping with? What do you do? It doesn't really happen. But then when someone assumes someone is gay, that's the ridiculous questions that come. You know, so it is a matter of saying when people say they don't want things in people's face, they should check themselves as to what they're asking for when questions like this is being put. The reality is people will always believe in religion. And whether they have various forms of it, you can put 2 stones and a bench somewhere and talk about God, and you're going to get somebody stopping. And soon that 2 stones and a bench is going to turn to a building. That's probably, and then they will no longer be walking, they'll be driving and have it all. But the point remains is, we're not even, how many times have you heard somebody or a group being gay have caused anybody in religion to die? How many times have you ever heard that because of a religion, or because of an LGBT grouping, because of a meeting, because of something said within an LGBT meeting, people have gotten up and feel that they can stone somebody or kill somebody? And people need to recognize what the cause is.
But haven't we heard instances where, for example, members of the LGBT community, and they're deemed to be quite influential and very powerful as well, they have gone after certain artists, certain performers who have lyrics that are anti-gay. And those people have been, for example, barred from entering the United States and Europe and from performing there and earning a living. Isn't that a contradiction in itself?
A contradiction that says what? We look at the Jamaican artists, and it has been very specific that a number of Jamaican artists have a number of homophobic songs that call for the killing and burning of people. And tell me, when groups decide to speak out about this, because, you know, people take it literally. It is no longer a song. People could tell you the lyrics of the song, and then when they call you and when they do certain things, that is what they quote. Now, music is just as influential as religion, unfortunately. But when you look at people standing up and say, you know what, we don't want our children to listen to this, or we don't want this coming into country, this is what it is. They have never stopped anybody from playing music or singing music. They have had even contracts that say, regardless of knowing that you have a history of singing whatever, we're going to give you an opportunity. Please perform, but do not perform certain songs that's inciting violence against. And people have gone blatantly against it.
But would you admit that the LGBT community is a very powerful one, very influential?
I don't think we're more powerful or more influential than the religious groups. I don't think we are. I think when the most influential and powerful people in the Caribbean, in society, and in many parts of the world are the religious groups. Whereas we have a conference and we can afford to bring 20 persons. And I'll give you an example. The Commission on the Status of Women happen at the United Nations in New York every year. Whereas the organizations that are able to find funding to bring persons have, say, about 20 persons representing LGBT persons from around the globe. Religious organizations have just trucked in and flew in about 72 persons. Tell me about the influence and the finance.
What we'll do right now is to put the telephone number on screen so that you can call with your questions and comments for my guest. Once again, Kenita Placide of Carry Flags, which is the Caribbean Forum for Liberation and Acceptance of Genders and Sexualities. We heard from one Bishop Ariste just yesterday. Do you also would really protect the fact that he has the right to speak out on issues of that nature?
He has the right. Mm-hmm. And there's nobody that says he doesn't. But the one thing that we ask persons is, as they decide to speak out, and again, this is why we have been so careful, is at no point would we want to trump another right for our rights. And this is a ticklish thing, because when we speak about human rights and the rights of individuals, you have the right to feel how you feel. I have the right to feel how I feel. There is a very conscious line that we need to be aware of is where your rights going to infringe on mine, or my rights going to infringe on yours. Now, if we look at the religion, where you say, okay, you know what? Based on their religion, they have the right not to marry gay persons. But within the Constitution, they cannot determine that the state cannot allow two same-sex persons to get married. They have the right as to who they allow into membership. They don't have the right to tell someone that is gay they cannot be a Christian. You know, so these are some of the things that are, it's touching. And again, people may wonder, how can I say that? But it is a case where I respect religion.
So you're saying that the two groups can coexist?
They
members
can
of
coexist.
the LGBT community and members of the Christian
They have
community.
always existed. And even then, if we watch into the history, we'd have to wonder why some of our colonial leaders even put a law like this. Because really and truly, some of the laws that has been put in here was not taken because it was in the Bible, but was taken because they felt they needed to control society.
But laws generally reflect the feelings and the principles and positions taken by people in a society. Shouldn't the law reflect how people feel in a society?
Was our laws really ours? How do we take colonial persons who actually had a number of black people into slavery and say that it reflects what we wanted? However, the one thing that you learn is that in a lot of situations is how people are able to adapt. And even then we ask ourselves, if someone have been kidnapped, how can they then love the kidnapper? Then we understand the issue.
Have a call on line. Good evening. This is Hot Button Issue. You on the air? Hello? Hello, good evening to you, caller. Hello? Okay, so I'm going to lose this call, but continue to call us. Once again, this is Hot Button Issue right here on Choice Television. My guest this evening is Kenita Placide of Carry Flags, and that is the Caribbean Forum for Liberation and Acceptance of Genders and Sexualities. What are you hoping to come out of the Barbados exercise this week, ma'am? Because my information is you'll be attending that. Somehow you might be attending. A little bit told me that, but hold that point. Good evening, Hot Button Issue, you on the air?
Yeah, just a question. With everything I'm hearing, I just want to know, what would we teach our young people who are coming up now? Is it okay to be with a male like yourself or to be with a female like yourself, if you're going on the standpoint of the Word of God? Because when God made us from the beginning, He made us male and female, the male for the female and the female for the male. But how do we really teach people it's okay to have liking for another male or female like yourself? Is that really right?
Okay, thank you so much for calling, sir. What say you, ma'am?
I think we need to have an understanding that most of our young people have a clearer and deeper understanding of this than even our older folks. So where most persons try to understand, how should I say that? How should I? The fact is, our young people are at school, and this is something that some of them may face. And even then, we do not create or bring children into the world for ourselves. So if we look at the furthering of education, is something that they will engage in. What we are actually looking for is at some point where our Minister of Education will not hide behind the theory of having to ask parents, but will actually have an honest conversation with us and talk about age-appropriate sexual education in school.
Let's get a quick, okay, we lost that call.
Okay, when you look at age-appropriate sexuality education,
what would that entail?
Then that looks at...
Would that say there should be acceptance for same-sex relationships and so on?
Really and truly, when they decided to teach us history, did we have a choice of what they taught us?
But,
I mean, the fact that the history happens, the fact that geography happens. Tell me, why is it that we are still teaching children sex like it's so taboo? It is something that happens. Persons believe that it's something that should be taught at homes, but the majority of youngsters tell you it's not. What does sex-appropriate language look like? or sexuality appropriate language. You look at the first ad that the Dental and Medical Association brought out, good touch, bad touch. This is a typical example of how you start teaching children what is good and what is bad, about how adults may touch you or what may happen that they need to be cautious of. This is a typical example.
A quick call. Good evening, Hot Button Issue, on the air.
Good evening.
Yes, quick contribution because we're getting all set for a commercial break.
Okay, I'm just asking the question. Just let's assume that one were to accept gay and lesbian rights, right? What would the world of St. Lucia become in a couple of years from now when it comes to populating the world with kids and moving on with life as usual?
Okay, thanks a lot.
I love this question. What has any other part of the world that have accepted such, has populations declined? I mean, people need to be realistic. There are a number of young children out there who need parents. How many persons are taking on such a task? I mean, not all gay persons want children, first of all. Secondly, even if they are not gay, there are a number of couples who do not want children or cannot have children. If we have to look at that number, is our population, are we going to die off in St. Lucia? And that's the kind of things that come up that just instills fear. Because our population will die, our country will die, our economics will fall. Why do these things, people? The reality is, whether you are gay or you're straight, you're a human being. Some persons who are gay still want to procreate. They still want kids of their own. And when they have kids, it does not necessarily mean that those kids are going to be gay.
Hold that point. Back in a moment to continue the discussion and take your calls. You're watching Hot Button Issue on Choice Television. Back. We continue to take your calls on the broadcast. This is Hot Button Issue on Choice Television with me, Timothy Polion, and my guest, Kenita Placide. Now, we have a call. Good evening. Let's try under the line. Hello, good evening. You're on the air. Hello.
Hi, good night.
Hi, good evening to you, ma'am. You're on the air.
Tim, I am not saying that we, like the young lady was speaking here earlier on, about people maybe discriminating and stuff. I mean, you don't do that because of the person's lifestyle. But then the mere fact of them trying to impose their laws and their ways on individuals, even to the extent where you would find that it would be in our educational system, I find it's really imposing on people. Because you cannot impose laws on people and on your beliefs. I mean, yes, some churches may not allow them to come in because, hey, if you're saying God created man, and God's laws cannot change, God is fixed in his laws, he created man and woman, what then would you want to be in a church where God's laws stand? It makes no sense. I don't say that they don't want to do the gay thing or whatever, but then don't impose it on people.
In what way? In what way you think that they're imposing it on people?
But look as far as where you would tell me that will be taught in our educational system. Trust me, better I homeschool my son instead, because I'm very afraid. Right now, I have a son and I reach almost to the point where I regret even bringing him into this world. Because let me tell you something, he will end up like a Sodom and Gomorrah. And that God does not tolerate. And I mean, it's time these people stop trying to justify. They're looking for justification for their act. That's like a thief going to court and is looking for all nick and crannies in the law that is to fix the pillars that the countries were formed on, the country's laws, and trying to look for a loophole to prove and to justify what he's stealing his right. I'm not saying that we should discriminate on gay people because stealing and theft and all of those things is wrong in God's law. But then wanting to impose that on people is wrong. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you so much. What say you, Kenita?
Take the next call.
Good evening, Hot Button Issue. You on the air?
Yes, good evening, Tim.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Tim, have you ever heard of the famous, I pushed her with my foot, but I didn't kick her?
Remember that comment, yes?
Interestingly, Tim, I know that a lot of people are saying that we are supposed to allow and accept, the people's uh, way of living.
A sexual orientation.
Yes. All right. Now, that is that, and we can, but I, like a number of people, and I listened to Andre's show this morning, I tried to get him, have been saying that, yes, this is not the only sin. Yes, this is not the only thing that is wrong in our society, which is true. But here is the issue here. You are now making something which we know is not correct, something which we know which is not moral, not natural. I mean, look at nature. There is no animal in the animal kingdom that pairs itself with one of the same sex.
No animal. Correct. They have had nine species.
No animal in nature
that's
pairs
debatable.
itself with another of the same sex, unless they are in some like the wild animals that are in
no
groups
unless
and
there's
whatnot.
none.
But there is no way that they unite themselves in the form of a family where there are two males or two females. In the family setting, when you look at wild animals, let's not even say wild animals naturally. But that aside, the point I'm trying to make here, Tim, is that the difference is that you are now wanting to legalize that thing we know which is bad. So you're giving people a right to commit something, an act that we know is not right. It's similar to saying that, go ahead.
Hold that point, caller. Hold that point.
There's a difference between legalizing and decriminalizing, and people also need to know that.
No, there's not really a difference.
There is a difference.
No, because if you there are only two sides to that. But there are only either you on the left or the right. If you decriminalize, it's no longer wrong, basically, in the eyes of the law. And you basically legalize. So it's not like I'm not wrong, but I'm not right either. That doesn't stand. All right? Especially with God. You're either with him or against him. There's not somewhere in between with the devil, in between, and God in between. It's either on God's side or on the devil's side.
Okay, thanks a lot. Let's get a reaction from Kenita. Go ahead.
I don't know. There's a lot of conflicting things happening there. And I think people need to get the giving a child the tools to work does not necessarily say you tell them this is what you're going to do. And parents have the first and foremost influence in the child's life. But when you decide to shut down, there's a period where children will not necessarily come to you with certain conversations if they feel that you're totally against it. So again, parents, I ask you to open your minds in conversations where children do not feel that they are afraid of you. The conversation of age-appropriate sexual education, sexuality education, is not going to be teaching children how to have sex or when they have sex. Most recently, there was a book published where I have to wonder what's the age-appropriate language in this, showing a man and woman having sex and showing children whatever. I mean, people, get real. We are not jumping the gun. We have been going about this through constitution, not through churches. And there's a reason why. You cannot take out the humanity in an individual because of their sexual orientation. Carry Flags United and Strong and any other group that I work with look at the full fruits of a citizenship of the individual. We look at how this individual continuously contributes to society regardless of their sexual orientation. Why are they being judged on their sexual orientation? Why is it a full stop?
We have a call. Good evening. Hot button issue, you on the air?
Yeah, good evening, Tim. Just a question. To Ms. Placide and anybody else who's pondering. I'm wondering if any of those individuals, if they are same-sex marriages, would like to raise a family with children. Because my question is, if there is a way for you to be able to naturally procreate and make children, I believe to choose to not go that way and then to want to adopt a child later on, I think is definitely wrong. All right? Because that child is not going to be open to freely being able to express themselves sexually, like she's trying to say, because they would now be growing up in an environment where they would see that as normal and acceptable. And I'm saying, obviously, 2 males or 2 females cannot procreate. And then why would they then want to adopt children that are born out of...
Okay, thank you so much.
Well, I guess if a child is up for adoption, it says a lot as to why they may have the option to adopt in the first place. But I think persons need to recognize one thing. A number of children who are born to same-sex couples, whether through surrogates, whether through artificial insemination, whether through finding a father who donate the sperm, or whichever case that they may use, or more often than not, children born to same-sex couples are planned. When they decide to have a child, to have a family, this is planned. This is not something that happened, that I'm having sex with this individual and by chance they get pregnant and I have to take care of it. It is something that is more than 95% of the time planned. And those children, and I can show you a number of friends that have raised children right here in St. Lucia, people, that has raised great young women and men who have now gone on to have girlfriends and boyfriends and procreate themselves. So how do you tell me that those persons, those children will not have a full life? You know, and the one thing that people need to recognize, majority of the time, straight people have gay kids. So what happened to gay people having straight kids? You know, don't they help? You know, some of these things tonight have me. Sorry.
Good evening. What about the issue? You on the air?
Good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, sir.
Yes, Tim. While I respect the gay organization, because everybody have the right to decide what they want. But when it comes to children, one of the things that I always, because the gay people, they're one of the nicest set of people to work with. They're very tidy. They're very, you know, trust me, I work with them for a number of years, and they're very nice people. But when it comes to the raising of kids and so on, who that child would call daddy? Well, in a house of 2 men, which one of them would be called daddy? Or which one of them you would call mommy? Which one of them? I would just like to ask.
Thanks a lot. I think it's a fair question, isn't it? Isn't it a fair question? Let's take a call. Good evening, Albert Nishu, you on the air? Hello?
Hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, ma'am.
Yes, sir, I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, I don't believe, I'm getting the impression that Ms. Placide is under the general idea that gay persons want to be ostracized or cast out of society. I don't think that's a general take on this thing. I mean, it's just a way of life that the general public, persons in general, cannot accept, because persons who believe in God don't believe that it is right. Okay, but the main question I wanted to ask is part of the whole sex education is not about having sex, but it's about reproduction. So I want to know how a gay couple will explain reproduction to their child when they're not living that example. You know, what are the questions? Obviously, we know the questions that the child would ask. If I have 2 mommies, how can I have a brother or a sister? It is not a natural thing. And if you are a family, why do you have to be dependent on somebody outside of that union to bring children into your home? Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much. What's your name?
Sorry, I didn't get the last part.
What you're saying that if you, for example, you have 2 men or 2 women living together, okay, in a family, why should you depend on somebody who is a heterosexual to produce a kid for you?
Well, for a number of the gay couples I know with kids did not have to depend. A lot of persons have decided, hey, I want to have a child, and whichever partner has the child. St. Lucia don't have many options, and so you can imagine by what option they have used. But then that is them. And I think that the fact that when we look at kids, and this is something that can derail everything altogether. You see the issue of marriage and kids and people understanding. We have had situations. So Tim, you and I have a kid. Today you are there, you are the child's daddy. She is now 7 years old. She knows you as daddy. We broke up, tomorrow there's somebody else. What does she call him? And tomorrow I've broken up with him. What does she call the next person? This is the reality of St. Lucia. But then I guess it will be stressed as to what the gay couples, you know, there's no need. I have one daddy and the child know who that daddy will be. And if both of them are playing father roles, that child would know that too. They would also know who the feminine. And I think there's something that you need to know. I don't think they have any gay couple that hides from a child how procreation takes place, how you could have a child, what is needed to have a child. And I think it has brought into the fold that a number of young people who have been raised by gay couples, more often than not, are more open. I'm not saying more intelligent, they are more open in terms of how they are able to deal with people and deal with diversity.
Let's take the final comments from you, ma'am.
I think it's a case that people recognize that I happen to be one of the persons involved in not just one organization, but multi-organizations. I work with United and Strong, with AIDS Action Foundation. I work with Caribbean HIV/AIDS Alliance. And the one thing that we look for within all those organizations is the quality of life of an individual. Whether HIV positive, whether LGBT, whether sex worker, whether, you know, youth at risk. And I think people need to recognize that there's diversity in all that we do. And all that we do, you may not necessarily accept, you may not necessarily agree with, but we need to agree to disagree. Reduce stigma and discrimination, reduce the violence, understand that sexuality is not where we judge people or put them into a binary. And yes, LGBT people are religious, are spiritual, but the fact is they are human beings. And as this continue, CARIFLAGS will continue building cultural understanding. We will be looking at litigation, policy, and continue moving within the Caribbean to ensure the fruits of a citizenship is obtained by all persons, especially the LGBT community. And it does not mean that if you're not LGBT and there is a cause or there is something happening to you, that we will not speak out against it. We speak out against all equalities.
Thank you so much, Kenita Placide, for being my guest on this evening's Hot Button Issue. Thank you so much for watching the broadcast and contributing via your calls. If it's Wednesday, we discuss a hot button issue right here on Choice Television. We have a clip that peak extracted from Facebook.
Watch this, yeah.
Such a character, but
No water, eh?
And a very good evening to you. My name is Timothy Polion. See you next time.